All right. Welcome to Every PCOS Body podcast. I'm Jenny.
Welcome. I'm Shelby.
How is everyone today? Hopefully you're doing well. And today we are going to do another mini podcast. And we are actually doing something I am super excited about. And that is we are going to talk about Shelby's PCOS story. How are you today, Shelby?
I am good. I'm actually a little bit nervous about telling my story. I know I've told it 100 times over and over online, but when I'm talking to you as a friend, I'm talking to the world as a friend, it's kind of personal. So, I mean, I'm ready. I think people need to hear it, but I mean, it's not easy to talk about.
I totally get that. But you're an online celebrity. Like you have tens of thousands of followers that follow you online and know your story. So this is easy for you. Like did they see you in your undies?
I mean, well, yeah. I mean, everyone has seen me in a lot of different ways, but I feel like when you're telling your PCOS story, it's almost like an ever-evolving story, because my PCOS story is from 4 years ago when I started this journey is completely different today, and that's one of the main things why we started this podcast is to talk about how ever-evolving PCOS is and how it changes over time. But you're right. Let's do it. Let's talk about it.
Kaleidoscope syndrome. We'll have to. We're gonna trademark that in the big three.
For sure. For sure.
We'll have to talk about that later. Me going off on a tangent. So I have prepared questions for you.
Dun dun
dun dun dun dun. So for our podcast people, we're actually doing this and we're recording video recording. So we'll have this up on YouTube as well. Silly faces. So you get to see how animated we are because we're both very animated.
I don't know what you're talking about. Not me at all.
Yeah. We're totally boring.
For sure.
I talk with my hands a lot. Shelby does too.
You do.
Have you noticed?
As I say, you do. I use my hands.
I do. Anyway, back on track. I've prepared some questions for you. And we're recording this, both video. So we're going to put this up on YouTube, which will hopefully get us some more people involved in learning more about every PCOS body and have more people learning about Shelby.
Dun, dun, dun. Dun, dun, dun. Why do I feel like that's the dun dun dun? Like it's okay to talk about it, but I'm just feeling nervous. But okay, let's do it.
Because making our own sound effects is so much more fun than using the provided sound effects that we're allowed to use.
Like the bongo.
Yes. All right. So
please
Shelby,
add a bongo to that in the after show.
I totally will. I will when I'm editing. Let me ask you this, Shelby. When were you first diagnosed? Tell me about that.
Okay. So I was first diagnosed when I was struggling to get pregnant with my second child. But in hindsight, knowing all that I know now, I should have been diagnosed a lot sooner. But like a lot of people that I've talked to online and in real life, when I start talking about PCOS is, the diagnosis came too late. It was a catch-up effect. I got diagnosed when I was struggling to get pregnant with my second child. Because I never knew anything about PCOS. I had never even heard of it. I got pregnant like nothing with my son. So I never thought I would have a problem getting pregnant with my second child.
How old were you and how long after your first child was that?
So I had Parker when I was 25. And then me and Scott, my husband, and Parker's dad, obviously, started trying to have a second child immediately after we had Parker because we wanted them to be close in age. And we're like, oh, okay, it'll happen. Like I said, no problems getting pregnant with Parker. It wasn't planned. It happened. So no problems getting pregnant with my second child, right? No, wrong. So it took turning 26, turning 27, and then I'm turning 28, and it's been 3 years, and I'm like, well, why am I not getting pregnant? So my gynecologist sent me to a reproductive endocrinologist, and I'm sitting there, and he's almost like laughing. He's like, well, you have something called PCOS, but it's pretty classy because you have pearls on your ovaries. And I'm like, oh, okay. I had no idea what it was. And I said, what is this? And he goes, well, you will struggle with your weight. You're going to need help getting pregnant. And that's about it. If you need any more information, go to Google. And he literally sent me on my way, said, if you want to have a baby, let's talk about Clomid. Let's talk about shots. Let's talk about this. If you don't want to have a baby, let's talk about birth control. And that's all I can do for you. Try losing some weight. And then I was on my own. So that's kind of where I got diagnosed, and kind of where I went self-diagnosing online to the internet, where I was using Dr. Google and saying, what is PCOS? And all this information came up, and I was very confused, like a lot of women and a lot of people with PCOS are.
So your RE actually told you to use Dr. Google?
Yeah, no. And it's not the first doctor that told me that, because I got diagnosed when my gynecologist sent me to a reproductive endocrinologist. He goes, this is what you have. He's like, here is what it's called, and I can give you birth control. I can give you Clomid if you want to have a baby. Anything beyond that, you need to go online. And so I went to Google.
So, and I apologize to everyone and to you. Is like, that's going to be preceding every question I have. For looking back now, how long do you think that you showed symptoms? Not even, do you think that you showed symptoms even prior to Parker being born?
Oh, absolutely. So
Okay.
like I said, knowing what I know now, with the help of Dr. Google, with the help of the big PCOS community that is online, finding good resources, looking back now, I should have been diagnosed when I was in my teens. When I was in my teens, like a lot of women with PCOS, a lot of people my age suffered with disordered eating. So when I missed periods or they were very irregular, it was chalked up to, well, she has anorexic tendencies. She's not eating enough. She is deprived. That she's malnourished. That's why she's not having periods. And that, I'm 15, 16 years old. That's what my doctor's telling me. I believe it, But then looking back, I also, even though I was malnourished, I still didn't lose weight. I was still gaining all my weight in my tummy. My cholesterol issues were off the wall. I had mental health issues. So I had no idea what that meant at 15 or 16 or 17. But now that I look back, if I had an educated resource or a doctor that said, oh, well, okay, let's look at this as a possible PCOS case, I could have been diagnosed way earlier and probably could have tackled it and gotten a head start on some of the preventative measures. But yeah, absolutely. In my teens, first and foremost, in my teens, when my periods were irregular and it was chalked up to either not eating enough or hormones or, whatever, but it wasn't chalked up to PCOS. I had never heard that until I was diagnosed at, 27, 28.
If a doctor had looked at the cumulative of all the symptoms you were showing, PCOS would have been PCOS. Hey, hello.
Absolutely.
But everyone was looking at the individual things when you were teenagers. That makes sense. That's very common with PCOS, as you know, and as a lot of patients with PCOS experience, is that they'll go in for one thing that is bothering them at that time, and even discuss maybe some other symptoms that they may be showing that are related to PCOS, but the doctor doesn't make that connection. And it's a really sour downfall and real bad disconnect in the medical community, that they don't take a look at the whole. they don't look at all those symptoms and make that connection. There's a connect the dots there. And so much of the medical community doesn't do that. They don't make those connect the dots and say PCOS for a condition that affects 1 in 5 people with female reproductive organs. The fact that PCOS still shows up on articles and TV shows that are based on mystery diagnoses, it's astounding that, you know, something that's so prevalent in our in the medical world, that this diagnosis is still considered a mystery diagnosis when it's so relevant to so many people.
I think it's such a missed opportunity, and I find myself saying this a lot when I have conversations with people, is like, if we only knew, if we only had someone to tell us. You know, a lot of the symptoms of PCOS, when they get advanced, or they get, I hate to say too far gone, but when they get to a certain point, you're in repair mode, and so many issues can be prevented or alleviated or relieved by early diagnosis, early recognition of this is not just a girl with missed periods because of she's not eating, or a girl that has you know hormonal issues. When we have a knowledgeable medical professional or someone say, hey, I get these dots, I'm connecting it, then there's so much more you can do to prevent the onslaught of things that can be possible side effects when you have uncontrolled PCOS. You know, a lot of times, and we'll talk about this in many podcasts moving forward, but especially our first full episode is, you know, the weight, the infertility, things like this. If you're early diagnosed, or you're understanding of the diagnosis in a stage where you can prevent some of these things, it doesn't have to be as severe. It doesn't have to be as problematic, because you can take steps lifestyle wise and mentally wise where you know what you're dealing with. So I guess my problem, and the whole reason why I got involved in PCOS advocacy online, is it didn't have to be this hard for me. Like, it didn't have to be this hard for me. If someone would have said, this is what it is, this is what you can change, this is what you can do, like, it's not doom and gloom, let's fix this. You know, when you're not facing something, when you're constantly in repair mode and you're in, okay, I'm aware of this, let's take better care of myself, preventative measures, it's a lot easier to handle and a lot easier to manage. But when you're facing something that seems really scary, and when it's your person, a woman, a person that wants to have children, a person that wants to fit in society, and the main issues with PCOS you're facing are weight or infertility or hair growth that you don't want, like all of these things that can cause crushing emotional consequences, you have to have a resource and an outlet and a way to navigate this without feeling like you're alone. And a lot of women, I feel like, and a lot of people living with PCOS, because there's many people living with PCOS, face like this, oh my gosh, I'm the only one going through this, because they feel so misunderstood by their medical professionals. They don't think anyone else understands. And there's so many people that understand. You know?
Had to do this little clap. And I love everything that you just said, and it totally ties into my next and final question that I had regarding this, which was, how did your initial diagnosis make you feel? Because I know you, and I know your story on a personal level, and I've followed your story from almost the beginning, but some of our listeners haven't. But your initial diagnosis, prior to what you know now, being an advocate and having such a big following and everything right now, and what you did with your diagnosis, and how you changed really the community, because you made a huge imprint on the community. how did your initial diagnosis make you feel? Like, how did it get you from your initial diagnosis to all of a sudden you are a PCOS celebrity? Like, how did that happen? How did that arch happen from diagnosis to all of a sudden, you're a celebrity? I know you hate it when I say that.
I hate that.
But it's true. Like, when I saw you, first of all, when I saw you at the PCOS Challenge symposium last year in 2018, seeing people see you for the first time, it was like people seeing celebrities in Hollywood. Their faces lit up, and I would see people whisper to their friends that they were saying, "Oh my God, that's Shelby. Do you think she would take a picture with me?"
And
Straight
I
up,
totally
like,
probably did. I was like, "Come on!"
oh yeah, you were just like, if you were like zoned out or like begging
constantly
Brian for
doing
help,
something.
begging Brian for, like, oh my God, Brian, how do I do this with the computer? Because that
we gotta let Brian. Thank you, Brian, for all you do. You're an amazing man.
But it was absolutely adorable, and it was amazing, and I was like, oh, she's so amazing. Oh, and like, heart bubbles.
I think
but
what
anyway,
I would say
back
to
my
that,
question.
Yeah, I think what I would say to that is, when I was first diagnosed, I was like, pardon my, this fucking sucks. Like,
We swear here.
We swear here. My doctor basically made me feel like, okay, you have pearls, like, literally left me with nothing. Like, and then he said, go to the internet, and then you go on Facebook, and God bless America to Facebook, but like, a lot of the groups are just doom and gloom and blah blah blah, like, and it was just so Debbie Downer, and I was like, this can't be the rest of my life. I can't live like this, and I just was determined to not let it crush me. Because PCOS sucks. It sucks so bad, especially when like no one understands it and you're left on your own, kind of wailing and flailing, trying to figure it out. But like, it sucks so hard. Like, I know that sounds so much like sucks so hard, but like, we don't have to suck. So like, my whole thing was, I cannot be the only person that feels this way, and that's what I found, is like, just telling other people. And it was so crazy because you start talking about something, and even though it's extremely uncomfortable to share with your friends and family and strangers on the internet, like, hey, I have this really weird hormonal thing that makes me kind of fat and makes me not be able to, like, it's so uncomfortable. But once you do and you start telling your story, someone else is going to message you and say, oh my God, me too. And oh my God, thank you, I'm not alone. And like, just like one message like that was enough to say, okay, this is important to talk about. This is important to make people understand that they are not alone. Because I cannot tell you how many messages I got from different people saying, I thought I was the only person in the world with this, because it's so misunderstood, even by medical professionals, even by the people that are supposed to be the people helping us. And people feel so incredibly alone. So when I was diagnosed, of course, I felt completely lost. I felt like, oh my hell, what am I going to do with this? But now, even though it still sucks and it's ever evolving, and my PCOS has changed in the past 5 years that I've done this, it's not something that is going to take me down. It's not something that's going to crush me. It's something that I'm going to use as a way to help others and navigate my life. And I've said this all the time, like, you could get diagnosed with anything, okay? But what you do with that diagnosis is what's going to define you. So yes, PCOS sucks. It really sucks. It makes life really hard a lot of days. There are so many different symptoms and side effects that we will go into in other episodes about this, but it's not going to be who I am. And my main thing is, even though I was diagnosed and I was scared shitless, I am not letting that be who I am. It's just a part of me, and it's going to be a badass part of me, and I'm going to lead my life in an example so other people can understand that this is not who you are. It's a diagnosis. It's not a definition.
God, I love you.
I love you too.
All right. So absolute last question before we sign off, because this is a mini episode, is what do you want to leave our listeners with concerning your PCOS story?
What I would leave people with is every PCOS story is different. And even though my story might not be the same as yours, your story is not any less valid or any less real because of how it presents. We'll talk about this over and over again. PCOS presents so differently from different people to different life stages. It's just because your story doesn't sound like mine or Jen's or the next person here on this podcast doesn't mean your story is any less real. There are so many different aspects in perceptions of PCOS, and I just want everyone that's living with this to understand that yes, it sucks, and yes, it affects so many people, but it's going to affect everyone differently, and we're all in this together, and we have to understand that this community needs us all to stick together and be strong and be more accepting of all the different stages and phases of PCOS. So I want all of us to come to this Every PCOS Body podcast and understand that it's all inclusive. We're going to talk about all of it. And every story matters because everyone's story is a little bit different, and every story, no matter how hard or, difficult it sounds, like we all are in this together.
You're amazing.
I love you.
Thank you for sharing your story with us today, Shelby.
Thank you for asking.
You're amazing. And with that, we're going to go ahead and end our mini podcast. Thank you for listening, and make sure that you subscribe, find us on all of your favorite podcast listening stations. And
coming September 1st, we have our big announcement of what's coming. I'm seriously so excited about it. It's in a couple days. This is a big deal.
Yes, it's going to be epic. And it's all in preparation for September, which is PCOS Awareness Month. Making PCOS awareness. I say.
That's right. We love you all, and we can't wait to talk to you.
Thank you for listening. And this one will be our first YouTube episode.
Woo!
We are doing this.
So pretty.
How? All right. With that, we love you all. Thank you for listening, and join us next time.
All right. Bye.